The stars had always been there, cold and distant, watching over a universe that cared nothing for the struggles of any single world. Among those countless points of light, a small blue planet orbited an unremarkable yellow star. On that planet, billions of humans lived, fought, loved, and died, completely unaware that they were being watched. The Galactic Council had existed for over 12,000 years. 47 different species from across the spiral arm of the galaxy met in their great station, a construct the size of a moon that floated in neutral space between the territories of its members. The council chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, with holographic displays that could translate the appearances and words of species so different that some breathed methane while others absorbed radiation. It was in this chamber. The junior survey officer Talvek presented his routine report. He was a Venturi, a species that looked somewhat like an oversized praying mantis, with blue-green skin that shimmered under the chamber's lights. His forearms moved across his datapad with practiced efficiency as he brought up the scan results from Sector 447J. "Standard survey results," he said in his clicking, translated voice. 12 systems surveyed. 3 with basic bacterial life, 1 with multicellular organisms in early ocean development, and 1 with a Class 7 pre-FTL civilization. The council representatives barely looked up. Class 7 civilizations were common enough? Still developing. Still fighting among themselves. Still centuries away from faster-than-light travel or unified planetary government. The standard protocol was simple: mark the system as off-limits, place monitoring satellites at the edge of the system, and check back in a few hundred years. Catalog it and move on, Council Speaker Morvena said. She was a Tarlian, one of the founding species of the Council. Her people looked almost like humans, except for the silver skin and the third eye in the center of their forehead that could see into the ultraviolet spectrum. She had been council speaker for 40 years and had overseen the discovery of 17 primitive species. None of them had been particularly interesting. Talvek nodded and was about to close his report when Representative Zur stood up from his seat. Zur was Zorethi, a species that had built their civilization on commerce and resource extraction. The Zorethi looked like bipedal lizards with dark red scales and yellow eyes that never seemed to blink. They were not known for their patience. "Wait," Zur said, his tail swishing behind him. "What resources does this system contain?" Talvek pulled up the data. "Scanning shows standard planetary composition. The third planet has abundant water and carbon-based life. Significant mineral deposits. The asteroid belt between the fourth and fifth planets shows unusually high concentrations of heavy elements. Platinum, iridium, gold, and several rare isotopes that valuable," Zur interrupted. He turned to address the council. "The Zorethe Dominion requests mineral extraction rights for this system. The natives are pre-FTL. They have no capability to access these resources. We can deploy automated harvesters that will not interfere with the planet itself." Council Speaker Morvena frowned. "The protocols clearly state that any system with intelligent life, regardless of development level, must be treated with respect. We do not simply take from others." Zur spread his clawed hands. "We are not taking from them. We are harvesting materials in space that they cannot reach and will not miss. Our economic models show that this asteroid belt could supply our manufacturing needs for 2 centuries. The alternative is surveying another 300 systems, which will take decades and cost significantly more." The debate began. The Tarlians argued for strict adherence to protocol. The Zorethi argued for practical resource management. Other species took sides based on old alliances and trade agreements. The Venturi remained neutral, as they always did. The Kresh, a species of aquatic beings who attended via hologram from their water-filled chambers, suggested a compromise. "We allow the extraction," the Kresh representative burbled through their translator, "but with conditions. No contact with the natives. All operations must be conducted with automated systems only. If the natives develop space capability and object, we cease operations immediately." It was a reasonable compromise. After 2 hours of debate, the vote was called. 31 species voted in favor. 12 voted against. 4 abstained. The Zorathi had their authorization. 3 months later, the Zorathi harvester fleet entered the system that the natives called Sol, 12 massive stations, each the size of Earth's moon, positioned themselves throughout the asteroid belt. They began their work immediately, using gravity beams to capture asteroids, break them down, and extract the valuable minerals. The processed materials were transported via quantum gate back to Zorathi space. While the worthless rock was simply discarded, the harvesters were marvels of automation. No living crew was needed. Each station had artificial intelligence systems that could identify valuable materials, coordinate with the other harvesters, and optimize extraction patterns for maximum efficiency. They had operated in dozens of systems before this one. They were reliable, proven, and profitable. The Zorathi economic projections proved conservative. The asteroid belt was even richer than initial scans had suggested. Within the first month, they had extracted enough platinum to pay for the entire operation. Everything after that was pure profit. On the third planet, the humans went about their lives. Most had no idea that anything had changed. But in observatories around the world, astronomers began to notice something strange. Asteroids that had been tracked for decades were missing. Orbital calculations that had been precise for years suddenly showed discrepancies. Objects that should have been exactly where predicted were simply gone. Dr. Sarah Chun was the first to realize the pattern. She worked at the Mauna Kea Observatory in Hawaii, tracking near-Earth objects that might pose collision threats. At 3 in the morning, after checking her data for the 14th time, she picked up the phone and called her colleague in Arizona. "John, something is taking our asteroids," she said without preamble. "What are you talking about?" "Asteroids don't just disappear." "I know what I'm seeing. 37 objects from my tracking list are gone. Not moved. Not miscalculated. Gone, and the pattern suggests something is actively removing them." John was quiet for a long moment. "Send me your data." Within a week, the discovery had spread through the astronomical community. Within 2 weeks, it had reached government officials. Within 3 weeks, every major power on Earth knew that someone was in their solar system, taking their resources without permission. The reaction was not what the Galactic Council would have expected. There was fear, yes. There was confusion and debate. But there was also something else, something that humans had refined over thousands of years of competing against each other. There was anger, and in that anger, old enemies found common ground. The United Nations Security Council held an emergency session that lasted for 6 hours. For the first time in history, not a single representative used their veto power. The resolution passed unanimously. Humanity would respond. Not with messages or pleas, not with attempts at communication or diplomacy. They would respond the only way that made sense to a species that had fought for every inch of progress in their history. They would fight back. The Zorathi harvesters continued their work, oblivious to the change below. Their sensors were focused on asteroids, not on the primitive chemical rockets that the natives supposedly could barely get into low orbit. They had no reason to watch the third planet closely. That was their first mistake. The room was deep underground, carved into solid granite beneath the Swiss Alps. Around a circular table sat representatives from nations that had spent the last century viewing each other as enemies. American generals sat across from Chinese admirals. Russian scientists worked alongside European engineers. Indian physicists shared notes with Pakistani mathematicians. The old grudges and suspicions remained, buried just beneath the surface. But they were overshadowed by something more powerful. For the first time in human history, Earth had a common enemy. "We need to understand what we're dealing with," said Director James Morrison of NASA. He pulled up holographic displays showing the harvester closest to Earth's orbit. The images came from the Hubble Space Telescope, pushed to its absolute limits. Whatever this thing is, it's massive. Roughly 3,000 kilometers in diameter. It's processing asteroids at a rate of approximately 40 per day. Processing for what? asked General Jiang Wei of the Chinese Space Force. Minerals, we think. The asteroids go in whole. What comes out is sorted debris. The valuable materials just vanish. We think they're using some kind of matter transmission technology. Teleportation, muttered Dr. Yuki Tanaka from the Japanese Space Agency. That means they're significantly more advanced than us. Obviously, snapped General Petrov from Russia. The question is what we do about it. Ambassador Okonkwo from the African Union leaned forward. Has anyone attempted communication? Perhaps this is a misunderstanding. Morrison shook his head. We've transmitted on every frequency we can generate. Radio, laser, even modulated X-rays. If they're receiving, they're not responding. Or they don't care. They don't see us as worth talking to, said Admiral Torres, from the United States Navy. We're insects too. Them primitives. They're taking what they want because they assume we can't stop them. The room fell silent. Every person there understood the implication. They had all studied history. They all knew what happened when a technologically superior civilization encountered a weaker one and decided the weaker one didn't matter, so we show them they're wrong, said General Jiang. We prove we can fight back. With what? Ambassador Okonkwo spread her hands. Our best rockets can barely reach Mars. These things are in the asteroid belt. And even if we could reach them, what would we use? They clearly have technology centuries beyond ours. Dr. Elena Volkov, a Russian physicist who had won the Nobel Prize 3 years earlier, stood up. She was small, barely over 5 feet tall, but when she spoke, everyone listened. We have nuclear weapons. Thousands of them. They're meant for targets on Earth, but the physics doesn't care about the target. An explosion is an explosion. You want to nuke them? Morrison looked skeptical. We have no idea if that would even work. Their technology is designed for industrial work, Elena interrupted. Look at the structure. It's built for efficiency, not defense. Those exposed processing arms, the open collection bays, they're not expecting resistance. Why would they? They think we're harmless. Admiral Torres studied the holographic display. She's right. It's like a strip mining operation. Big, expensive, and completely vulnerable if someone decides to attack it. The question is how we get a weapon close enough. Over the next 6 months, the project consumed the efforts of every space agency on Earth. It was given a simple name, Operation Resolve. The mission was equally simple: reach the nearest harvester and hit it. Hard enough to make whoever operated these things reconsider their presence in Earth's solar system. The spacecraft they built was crude by the standards of what humanity hoped to achieve someday. It used Orion drive technology, an idea from the 1960s that had never been built because it was too crazy, too dangerous, and required detonating nuclear bombs to create thrust. But it was also the only propulsion system humanity had that could reach the asteroid belt in a reasonable time frame. The Resolve was ugly. It was a thick steel plate with shock absorbers, topped by a command module that looked like it had been welded together from submarine parts because it had been. Behind the command module were storage racks holding 142 nuclear warheads, each one stripped from decommissioned Cold War arsenals and repurposed for this one-way mission. The crew was 6 people, volunteers from 6 different nations. They knew the odds. The Orion drive had never been tested with a human crew. The warheads might not work in space. The harvester might have defenses they couldn't see. Even if everything worked perfectly, they had no guarantee they could make it home. They went anyway. Commander Sarah Mackenzie from Canada watched through the viewport as Earth shrank behind them. Each nuclear detonation pushed them faster, the bombs exploding against the pusher plate in a rhythm that would have been terrifying if she had time to think about it. But there was no time for fear. Only focus. The journey took 42 days. They spent it training, reviewing plans, and trying not to think about how far from home they were getting. Communications with Earth had a delay that stretched to minutes, then to nearly an hour. They were truly alone. The harvester grew in their viewport from a distant, point of light to something that dwarfed their imagination. The scale was beyond anything humanity had built. The processing arms alone were larger than cities, moving with slow precision as they broke down asteroids into component elements. "It's beautiful, in a way," said Lieutenant Zhao from China, staring at the alien machinery. "It's theft," Mackenzie replied. "Prepare the weapons." They had debated strategy for months. The decision was simple. Don't try to negotiate, don't try to disable, don't try to capture. Hit them hard enough to get attention. Make it clear that humanity was not going to be ignored. The resolve moved into position, near the Harvester's main processing arm. The structure was open to space, relying on magnetic fields and gravity manipulation to move materials. It was efficient. It was elegant. It was also completely exposed. Mackenzie gave the order. "Launch all warheads." Sequential detonation pattern. 142 nuclear weapons ranging from 5 kilotons to 50 megatons launched from the Resolve. They spread out in a carefully calculated pattern, each one targeting a different section of the processing arm. The timing had to be perfect. It was. The explosions came in a wave, each one triggering exactly 3 seconds after the last. In the vacuum of space, there was no sound, no shockwave, no mushroom cloud. Just pure energy, radiation, and electromagnetic pulses that tore through the unshielded machinery of the Harvester. Alarms screamed through the Harvester's artificial intelligence systems. Damage reports flooded in faster than the AI could process them. 17% of processing Arm 7 was simply gone, vaporized by nuclear fire. Another 33% was damaged beyond automatic repair. 2 of the gravity field generators had failed completely. The magnetic containment system for Sector 12 was fluctuating dangerously, for the first time in 800 years of operation. Azorthi Harvester activated its emergency retreat protocol back on Earth. Every telescope and radio dish pointed toward the asteroid belt picked up the change. The Harvester was moving. Not processing. Not collecting. Moving away from the belt, away from Earth. Heading back toward the edge of the solar system. In the underground command center, the room erupted in cheers. They had done it. Humanity had reached out across millions of miles of empty space and punched an alien machine in the face hard enough to make it retreat. But in the back of the room, Dr. Elena Volkov did not cheer. She stared at the data screens, watching the other 11 Harvesters. They had not retreated. They had not stopped working. They had simply moved into tighter formations, as if preparing for something. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "We just started a war." The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the first called in 17 years. Representatives arrived through quantum gates, some pulled from important meetings, others woken in the middle of their sleep cycles. The chamber filled with confused and concerned voices in dozens of languages, all being translated by the central computer. Council speaker Morvena called the session to order. Her 3 eyes looked tired. "We have a situation in Sector 447J, Representative Zur, please explain." Zur stood, his red scales seeming darker than usual. 3 days ago, one of our automated harvesters in the system, designated Sol, was attacked by the local pre-FTL species. They used primitive nuclear weapons to damage the facility. Estimated repair costs are 43 million credits. 17% of processing capability was destroyed. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The Venturi representative stood up, his forearms spread in disbelief. "Impossible. Class 7 species don't have the capability to reach their own asteroid belts, let alone attack structures there." "Impossible or not, it happened," Zur said sharply. "We have full sensor logs. The natives constructed a crude vessel using nuclear pulse propulsion. They traveled to the Harvester and deliberately attacked it." Council Speaker Morvena held up her hand for silence. "This is unprecedented. In 12,000 years of Council history, no pre-FTL species has ever responded to first contact with immediate violence. What provoked this?" "We provoked nothing," Zur insisted. Our operations were conducted entirely in uninhabited space. We followed the authorized extraction protocols. The natives simply attacked without warning or communication. Did you attempt to communicate with them before beginning operations? Asked the Tarlian ethics representative. The authorization specifically stated no contact with the natives. We followed the council's own rules. The Kresh representative's hologram shimmered. Perhaps that was the error. They saw us taking their resources without permission or explanation. From their perspective, we are invaders. They are Class 7, Zur said, his voice rising. They have no legal standing under council law. They do not have resource rights beyond their own planet until they achieve FTL capability and unified government. Legal standing or not. They have clearly expressed their objection to your presence, said the Venturi representative. The question now is how we respond. Zur turned to face the full council. The Zorthe Dominion formally requests authorization for proportional military response. We propose to disable the vessel that attacked our property and neutralize the natives' ability to conduct further operations in space. This will demonstrate council authority and prevent future incidents. The debate lasted for 6 hours. The Tarlians argued for diplomatic outreach. The Zorthi demanded justice for the attack on their property. The Kresh suggested stronger isolation protocols. The smaller species worried about setting precedents. Finally, a vote was called. The resolution authorized a limited military response. Disable the attacking vessel, demonstrate superior technology to the natives, and establish a clear message that aggression would not be tolerated. The Zorathi were specifically instructed to avoid casualties if possible and to make first contact properly before taking any action. 3. Zorathi warships entered Earth's solar system 4 days later. They were not true military vessels. The Galactic Council had not fought a real war in 6,000 years. These were exploration ships with defensive weapons, operated by crews who had never fired on anything but asteroids and debris. Commander Vex of the warship Dominance was confident as he brought his ship into orbit around the third planet. The world below was beautiful, he had to admit. Blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents. It reminded him of the Zorathi homeworld before industrial development. Broadcast the message on all frequencies, he ordered. The message was carefully crafted by council diplomats. It explained that the Galactic Council existed. It explained that the Zorathi had been authorized to conduct resource extraction. It explained that attacking council property was unacceptable. It gave the humans 48 hours to surrender the crew of the attacking vessel and cease all space operations, or face consequences. On Earth, the message was received in every language, on every radio and television, on every computer and phone. For 6 hours, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the responses began. Government officials scrambled to craft diplomatic replies. The United Nations Security Council held emergency meetings. Religious leaders debated whether these aliens were angels, demons, or simply another form of life. Scientists analyzed every detail of the transmission, searching for clues about the aliens' technology, but while the diplomats talked and the scientists studied, the military acted. Every nation with space launch capability began moving assets into position. It was not coordinated. There was no unified command. It was chaos, driven by fear and anger and the very human instinct to fight back when threatened. The Russians launched first. 6 modified ICBMs, their nuclear warheads replaced with kinetic penetrators, screamed up from silos in Siberia. The Chinese followed with a barrage from their new railgun platform, still experimental but functional enough. The Americans fired everything they had on standby: converted missiles, weaponized satellites, even an experimental laser array that had been meant for shooting down other satellites. Most of the weapons missed. The Zorathi ships had shields designed to deflect micrometeorites and radiation. They easily handled the incoming fire. And Commander Vex watched the primitive attacks with something like pity. Then 3 tungsten telephone poles, each weighing 8 tons and moving at 23,000 miles per hour, punched through the shields of the ship Prosperity. They had been launched hours earlier by a Chinese space station. time to arrive with the other attacks. In the confusion, they went unnoticed until impact. The Prosperity's shields collapsed. Its hull was breached in 7 places. 17 crew members died in the explosive decompression. The ship began to list, its engines failing. Commander Thex stared in disbelief at his tactical display. Impossible, pre-FTL. Weapons could not penetrate Zorethi shields. The Council's own scientists had calculated it would take weapons at least Class 4 level to threaten their ships. These natives were Class -7. His anger overrode his orders for restraint. Target the source of the kinetic weapons, fire. The particle beam was designed for mining asteroids. It could cut through solid rock like a knife through water. When focused on a planetary target, it was devastating. The beam struck Kennedy Space Center at 3:47 p.m. Eastern Time. The temperature at the point of impact reached 10,000 degrees in less than a second. The spaceport, the launch facilities, the museums, and the nearby town of Cape Canaveral simply ceased to exist. The beam carved a crater 2 miles deep and 12 miles across before Commander Thex realized what he had done and cut the power. 7,000 people died. Another 15,000 were injured by the shock waves and heat that radiated outward. The death toll would climb to 11,000 over the next week as hospitals were overwhelmed with burn victims. Earth's response took 6 hours. In that time, every nuclear-capable nation retargeted their strategic arsenals. Not at each other. At the sky, the transmission that went out to the Zorethi ships was brief. It came in 47 different languages, but the English version was the most direct. You have killed our people. Leave our solar system within 12 hours or we will detonate every nuclear weapon we possess. We will destroy our own planet and create a radioactive cloud that will take centuries to clear. You will not be able to salvage anything here. You will not profit from our deaths. Leave now or we all die together. Commander Thex called an emergency conference with his fellow ship commanders. They are bluffing, he said, though his voice was uncertain. No species would commit suicide. No rational species would, agreed Commander Prowl of the 3rd ship. But are they rational? They attacked us first. They refused to negotiate. Now they threaten to destroy themselves rather than submit. Does that sound rational to you? They're primitive, Thex insisted. They don't understand what they're facing. Or we don't understand what we're facing, said Captain Renna of the Prosperity, broadcasting from her dying ship. My crew is dead, Commander. 17 good people who were doing their jobs? And for what? Resources we don't even need that badly? Is this worth starting a war we're not prepared to fight? Thex looked at his tactical display. The sensors showed thousands of weapons on the planet below, all pointed skyward. Primitive nuclear missiles, yes, but thousands of them. If even a fraction reached his ships, if the natives really were crazy enough to sacrifice their own planet... He made the decision. All ships retreat to the edge of the system. We report to the Council and let them decide what to do with these lunatics. The Zorethi ships left Earth orbit 8 hours after the ultimatum. They withdrew to the outer system beyond Neptune and sent a detailed report to the Council. The report's conclusion was simple. The humans were not like other species. They did not negotiate. They did not submit. They did not behave rationally. They were dangerous, unstable, and completely unpredictable. The report recommended immediate containment or extermination. Anything less, Commander. The emergency session had stretched into its 3rd day. The Council chamber was filled with tension as representatives argued back and forth about what to do with the human problem. Some called for military action. Others demanded strict quarantine. A few even suggested offering full membership immediately to avoid further conflict. Council Speaker Morvenna was exhausted. She had not slept properly in 70 hours. The debate kept circling back to the same impossible questions. How did they respond to a species that would rather die than submit? How did they protect themselves from a civilization that fought without rules or restraint? The xenobiologist team had presented their report that morning. Dr. Kelvin, a Venturi who had spent his entire career studying primitive species, stood before the council with what he called his findings. Humans are predators, he explained, his forearms gesturing at the holographic display showing Earth's evolutionary history. True apex predators. They evolved not by becoming stronger, but by becoming smarter and more cooperative. But that cooperation came with a cost. They are tribal. They form groups and they fight other groups. This has been their pattern for their entire existence. Many species went through predatory phases, said the Tarlian representative. We evolved past it. Did you? Dr. Kelvin tilted his head. Or did you simply become so successful that you had no remaining threats? Humans still have threats. They are threats to each other. Every advance in their technology has been driven by competition and conflict. They invented flight to fight wars. They developed nuclear power to build bombs. They reached their own moon because two of their nations were competing for dominance. So they are permanently violent? Asked a representative from one of the smaller species. There is no hope for peace? I did not say that. I said they are competitive. Competition does not always mean violence. But when threatened, they default to what has always worked for them. They fight. And they are very, very good at it. Representative Zur stood up angrily. Are we supposed to be impressed by their violence? They are primitive. They got lucky with a few attacks. If we committed real military resources, we would win, Dr. Kelvin interrupted. Eventually. But at what cost? They have thousands of nuclear weapons. They have shown they are willing to use them, even on themselves. A war with humanity would be devastating for both sides. Then what do you recommend? Council Speaker Morvenna asked. Dr. Kelvin was quiet for a moment. Containment. Not as punishment, but as protection. For them and for us, we isolate their system completely. We give them time to evolve past their violent phase. Perhaps in a few thousand years, they will be ready to join civilized space. The debate over the containment proposal took another full day. The Zorathi wanted harsher punishment. The Tarlians worried about the ethics of imprisoning an entire species. The Kresh suggested monitoring instead of full containment. But slowly, a consensus formed. The vote was called on the third day. 41 species voted in favor of containment. 4 voted against. 2 abstained. The barrier network would be constructed around the Sol system. It would be impenetrable, blocking all matter and energy from entering or leaving. Humanity would be isolated, left to either evolve into a peaceful species or destroy themselves in their own wars. Either way, they would never threaten the galaxy. Construction began immediately. The Council authorized the use of their most advanced technology, quantum-locked satellites that would maintain an energy barrier light years in diameter. 200 satellites, each one a marvel of engineering, were positioned at precise coordinates around the Sol system. The satellites were designed to last for 10,000 years without maintenance. They were automated, self-repairing, and impossible to disable from inside the barrier. The Council's best engineers had built them, confident that no Class 7 species could possibly understand the technology, let alone breach it. The barrier activated 93 days after the vote. From Earth, astronomers saw the stars disappear, replaced by a faint shimmer that marked the edge of their new cage. Panic spread across the planet. Governments scrambled to explain what had happened. Religious leaders called it the end times. Scientists worked frantically to understand the barrier. In the underground command center, Dr. Elena Volkov stood before a wall of monitors showing data streaming from every sensor humanity had. Her team had been watching the construction of the barrier for months, recording every energy signature, every quantum fluctuation, every piece of information they could gather. Tell me you found something, said Director Morrison, looking worse than Elena had ever seen him. The stress of the past months had aged him 10 years. We found everything, Elena replied. She pulled up a holographic display showing the barrier structure. They are using quantum entanglement to maintain the field. The satellites communicate with each other faster than light, adjusting the barrier in real time. It's brilliant. It's also vulnerable. Vulnerable how? Quantum entanglement requires paired particles. Each satellite is linked to all the others in a network. If we can understand the communication protocol, we can listen to their signals. We can learn how the technology works. Morrison shook his head. We're trapped in here, Elena. What good does understanding do us? We're not just trapped, Elena said quietly. We're surrounded by 200 fully functional examples of technology that makes faster-than-light communication possible. Do you understand what that means? She did not have to explain further. Morrison's eyes widened. If we can crack their communication system, we can build our own, Elena finished. And if we can communicate faster than light, we can travel faster than light. It's the same principle. Over the next 2 years, humanity changed in ways that would have seemed impossible before the arrival of the aliens. The old rivalries and suspicions did not disappear, but they were pushed aside by a common goal. Every nation contributed their best minds to understanding the alien technology. Resources were shared freely. Data was made available to everyone. They called it the Unity Project. It was not a perfect union. There were still arguments and disagreements, still political maneuvering and national interests. But there was also cooperation on a scale that humanity had never achieved before. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Dr. Amara Okonkwo, a Nigerian physicist who had been working on quantum computing before the aliens arrived, recognized a pattern in the barrier's fluctuations. The satellites were not just maintaining the barrier. They were also communicating with something outside the system. Regular status reports sent to the Council through the same quantum network. We can read their mail, she announced at a global scientific conference held via satellite link. Not everything. The encryption is sophisticated, but we can see the structure. We can see how the network operates. And more importantly, we can see how they encode location data. If they could understand location encoding, they could understand navigation. If they could understand navigation, they could build their own quantum drives. It would not be easy. It would take years, maybe decades. But it was possible. The work consumed humanity's attention. While the barrier remained impenetrable, research stations were built as close to it as possible. Sensors recorded every fluctuation. Computer systems ran millions of simulations. Slowly, piece by piece, humanity reverse-engineered technology that had taken the Galactic Council species thousands of years to develop. They did it in 2 years. The first human quantum drive was crude. It was inefficient, unpredictable, and had a failure rate of 30% in testing. But it worked. A small probe launched from a research station near Neptune activated its quantum drive and disappeared from normal space. It reappeared 3 seconds later, 2 light days away from where it started, faster than light travel. Humanity had achieved it. The second breakthrough came even faster. If they could make things travel faster than light, they could send messages faster than light. And if they could send messages, they could communicate through the barrier. The transmission was simple. Just a few words sent on the same quantum frequency the Council satellites used for their status reports. The message was aimed at the Council station, light years away. We're coming to talk. Don't make us do this the hard way. On the Council station, alarms began sounding. The message had come from inside the containment zone, from the species that was supposed to be trapped, the species that was not supposed to have any advanced technology at all. Council. Speaker Morvena read the message 3 times, not believing it was possible. Then she called for another emergency session. The humans, somehow, impossibly, had learned to use quantum technology. And if they could send messages through the barrier, they could probably send themselves through the barrier, the species they had tried to cage had picked it. Lock in just 2 years. Dr. Elena Volkov watched the data from the transmission and allowed herself a small smile. The message had been received. Now came the hard part, convincing the galaxy that humanity deserved a place among them. Not as primitives to be contained or resources to be exploited, but as equals. She pulled up the construction schedules for the fleet. 23 ships were complete, crude things held together with hope and determination, but functional. Another 400 were in various stages of construction. The Council's emergency military planning session was chaos. For the first time in 6,000 years, the Galactic Council was seriously considering preparing for war. The problem was that nobody really knew how anymore. We have 347 exploration vessels scattered across our territories, Admiral Kresh reported, his aquatic form shifting in the holographic display. Most are equipped with defensive shields and basic particle weapons designed for clearing debris. None are actual warships. How long to convert them? Asked Council Speaker Morvenna. Convert them to what? Admiral Kresh spread his fins in frustration. We do not have military weapon designs. We do not have armor specifications. We stopped building such things 3,000 years ago when the last conflict was resolved through diplomacy. Representative Zur stood up, his red scales darker with stress. The humans are coming. They said so. We need a defense. Against 23 primitive vessels? Scoffed the Venturi representative. Even our exploration ships could destroy them easily. Could they? Dr. Kelvin spoke up from his position at the xenobiology station. These are the same primitives who attacked our harvesters when they should not have had the capability. The same primitives who damaged our ships with weapons we thought could not penetrate our shields. The same primitives who cracked quantum barrier technology in 2 years, when our best scientists estimated it should take them centuries. Perhaps we should stop underestimating them. The debate continued for hours, but no consensus emerged. Half the council wanted to mobilize everything they had. The other half wanted to attempt diplomacy first. A few representatives suggested simply abandoning the sectors near Sol and letting humanity have empty space if they were so determined to leave their system. Council. Speaker Morvenna finally called for silence. We are making decisions based on fear and incomplete information. We need to know what we are actually facing. I propose we send a diplomatic envoy to meet these human ships. If they truly want to talk, we talk. If they want war... She paused, her 3 eyes closing briefly. Then we will have advance warning. The proposal passed by a narrow margin. A single diplomatic vessel was dispatched to intercept the human fleet. Its crew were volunteers, aware they might be flying into danger. They were given authority to negotiate on behalf of the Council. Ambassador Kelvin was Tarlian, from one of the Council's founding species. She had served as a diplomat for 40 years, mediating disputes between species across the galaxy. She had never been more nervous than she was now, watching the human vessels appear on her ship's sensors. They are not what I expected, her pilot said quietly. That was an understatement. The human ships were ugly, brutal things that looked like they had been assembled from scrap metal and determination. Nuclear reactors provided power. Thick armor plating covered the hulls. Weapons that seemed to be cobbled together from various technologies bristled from every surface. These were not ships built to explore. These were ships built to fight and survive, but they were also flying in formation, maintaining perfect spacing and coordination. Whatever else could be said about them, the humans knew how to operate as a fleet. Ambassador Kelvin opened a communication channel. This is Ambassador Kelvin of the Galactic Council aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony. We received your message. We are here to talk. The response came quickly. The voice was female, speaking in flawless galactic standard with only a slight accent. This is Captain Sarah Mackenzie of the Earth vessel Defiance. We accept your offer of negotiations. We propose meeting on neutral ground. We will transmit coordinates. The location was clever. A point in empty space, far from any inhabited systems, where neither side would have an advantage. Ambassador Kelvin agreed. 40-8 hours later, she found herself in a conference room aboard a temporary station that both sides had agreed to construct. The room was simple, a table, chairs suitable for both species and communication equipment. No weapons, no guards. Just 2 people trying to decide the fate of billions. Captain Sarah Mackenzie was younger than Ambassador Kelvin had expected. Mid-30s perhaps by human reckoning. She wore a military uniform that was pressed and clean despite months in space. Her eyes were hard but not cruel. A soldier who had seen combat, Kelvin thought, but not one who enjoyed it. Thank you for meeting with us. Mackenzie began. "We know this situation is unprecedented." "That is one word for it," Kelvin replied carefully. "You were contained for your own protection and the protection of others. You broke through a barrier that should have been impossible for your level of technology to breach. Now you arrive in warships, making demands? You must understand how this appears to us." "I do understand. It appears that we are dangerous, unstable, aggressive." Mackenzie leaned forward. "But let me ask you something, Ambassador. If someone came to your home, started taking your belongings without asking, and when you objected they tried to lock you in a cage, how would you respond?" "We followed proper protocols." "Your protocols," Mackenzie interrupted. "Not ours. You decided we were too primitive to have rights to our own solar system. You decided you could take what you wanted. You decided to imprison us. At no point did anyone ask us what we thought about these decisions." Ambassador Kelvin was quiet for a moment. "You attacked first. You destroyed property worth millions of credits, after you spent months stealing from us. If I came into your home and started removing items without permission, would you not have the right to stop me?" "It is not the same. It is exactly the same," Mackenzie said firmly. "Just because we did not have the technology to reach the asteroid belt does not mean we had no claim to it. Just because we had not achieved faster-than-light travel does not mean we should be locked in our own system. Your protocols treated us like children who needed to be managed. We are not children, Ambassador. We are a sovereign species, and we deserve to be treated as such." The truth of the words hung in the air between them. Ambassador Kelvin felt something she had not expected to feel in this negotiation: shame. Mackenzie was right. The Council had made decisions about humanity without including humanity in those decisions. They had judged, sentenced, and imprisoned an entire species based on bureaucratic protocols that assumed all species would be grateful for guidance. "What do you want?" Kelvin asked quietly. "Three things." Mackenzie held up 3 fingers. "First, the barrier comes down immediately. Second, Earth receives provisional membership in the Galactic Council with full participation rights. Third, the Council establishes new first contact protocols that require consultation with newly discovered species before any actions are taken in their territory." "You want to join the Council? After everything that has happened?" "We want to ensure this never happens to another species," Mackenzie said. "Your Council has existed for 12,000 years, meeting species who were peaceful, cooperative, and willing to follow your rules. You have forgotten how to deal with species who refuse to be managed. We will not be the last species you meet who values independence over security. Better to learn that lesson now." Ambassador Kelvin studied the human woman carefully. "And if we refuse?" "You have 23 ships. We have hundreds. Then we will fight," Mackenzie said simply. "And we will lose. Your technology is better. Your ships are more powerful. You will win the war." She paused. "But we will make it cost you everything. We will target your infrastructure, your trade routes, your stations. We will use every dirty trick, every desperate tactic, every bit of ruthlessness we have learned in 10,000 years of fighting each other. By the time you defeat us, the Council you are trying to protect will be damaged beyond recognition. Is that really what you want? You would sacrifice yourselves? If the alternative is to accept being treated as less than equals?" "Yes, absolutely." Mackenzie's voice was soft but certain. "You think we are violent and unstable. Maybe we are, but we are also survivors. We have faced extinction dozens of times in our history. Ice ages, plagues, wars that nearly destroyed us. Every time we survive by refusing to give up. That is what makes us human, Ambassador. We would rather die fighting than live in a cage." The negotiation lasted for 3 days. Mackenzie was joined by other human representatives, scientists, diplomats, and military officers. The Council sent additional ambassadors to verify the terms and report back. In the end, an agreement was reached. The barrier would be removed. Earth would receive provisional membership in the Galactic Council, with full membership pending after a review period of 50 years. The Council would establish new protocols requiring consultation with species. Before undertaking any operations in their territories. In exchange, humanity agreed to several conditions. They would submit their technology for inspection to ensure compliance with Council safety standards. They would accept Council mediators to help resolve internal conflicts. They would participate in joint research programs to share their rapid innovation methods with other species. The final ceremony was held in the Council chamber itself. Captain Sarah Mackenzie stood at the podium, looking out at representatives from 47 different species. Some looked at her with fear, others with curiosity, a few with respect. "You tried to teach us our place," she began, her voice carrying through the chamber.